Everybody, it's now 7:31. We'll begin open session, and I ask all to rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will begin the evening with agenda-related public participation. Marilyn, do we have agenda-related comments?
We have one.
Great. I'm going to take this moment to read something that we have read in the past. There are two opportunities for audience members to address the Board of Education. We appreciate your participation, but please understand we do not engage in dialogue. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Individuals addressing the board are expected to conduct themselves with respect and civility, pursuant to Board Policy 830. Individuals shall not use vulgar or obscene language or impede, delay, disrupt, or interfere with the board meeting. In the event this occurs, you will receive one warning regarding your conduct. If the behavior occurs again, you'll be notified that you are in violation of trespassing and will be asked to leave our property. Failure to comply immediately and cooperatively with a directive to leave will result in the involvement of law enforcement officials. Marilyn, can you please call the first speaker?
Elizabeth Slezak.
Hi, good evening. I was not planning to come and speak again on this topic, but I feel compelled to do so. I've already spoken about it at two past meetings in fall of 2021. But I feel compelled because the new grading policy still seems to be causing significant problems for both LT students and teachers. And that comment alone should tell you just about everything you need to know about this. It has caused problems at LT since its introduction, yet it continues some 20 months later. That, to me, is unacceptable. There has been apparently lots of time dedicated to analyzing and assessing this policy and its effect on students, yet we are still fumbling. This experimental policy is not only not helping the students, it is taking a toll on the teachers and how they can best do their jobs. After requesting the data that proves this policy is advantageous to the students at both the November and December meetings, I have yet to receive any such evidence from administration. 5 months have passed and still nothing. As such, I will assume that the data that proves its efficacy does not exist. Thus, the board and admin need to change course immediately before further damage is done to the students and the school, and potentially this community at large, via losing good teachers and decreasing property values. Of particular note, to me, is a stat that was mentioned in a presentation regarding formative work, which means quizzes and homework. Data from LT stated that 14% of schools surveyed had a similar policy of no homework or quizzes counting towards a grade. And please realize that though it is a small sampling of schools, it still means that 86% of schools do use formative guidelines for a student's grade. And that is because homework and quizzes are the norm, and they help kids learn the subject matter at hand. Those concepts have withstood the test of time with good reason, and that's because they work. Finally, I would like to remind the board members of an oath that you all took from the Illinois Association of School Boards. Falling under the Code of Conduct, it states, quote, "I will represent all school district constituents honestly and equally, and refuse to surrender my responsibilities to special interest or partisan political groups." End quote. I am not certain that all the members of the board are adhering to this rule. I hope I'm wrong, and that LT will right its course and stick to excellence in education instead of experiments in education. Thank you.
Thank you. The next we have is the LTEA president, Andrew.
Good evening. I am Andrew Johannes. I am the president of Lyons Township Education Association, or the LTEA, also the Teachers Union. I would like to address a few areas of concern regarding the comments made last week at the Committee of the Whole meeting. The grading policy has created many passionate responses from everyone with a variety of perspectives. First, it was suggested that teachers' concerns have not been brought to the attention of the Grading Implementation Committee. This is not true. During these meetings, we have and continue to address concerns that teachers are experiencing implementing the grading change. We continue to believe that the committee is the best forum to address these concerns. The LTA is calling for an expansion of the committee to include more teachers. Secondly, to suggest that teachers are resistant to change just because is not accurate. The teaching profession is a constant state of change. For evidence, just look at the past 3 school years. During these 3 pandemic years, teachers were constantly changing to meet the needs of their students. Change is difficult and messy and doesn't always go according to plan, especially what we've experienced with this new grading policy. As was stated at the last meeting, schools, like Stevenson, have undertaken grading changes that have taken 10 years to fully implement. Changing a grading policy is a difficult process because it involves a philosophical change for many teachers. To alleviate the stress that is caused by the change, it is important to have supports, training, and feedback from teachers. In addition, as was acknowledged by Scott, this is going to take a significant amount of curricular work. Teachers are more than willing to make changes as long as they understand why it is occurring and how it will benefit the students. Teachers are dealing with a loss of autonomy and not feeling there is enough time to effectively integrate the change for the benefit of the students. We continue to ask for teacher concerns to be heard throughout the process, and the administration has stated they are interested in this. We continue to believe that the most effective way to do this is through the Grading Implementation Committee. This group heard from the teachers and suggested a modification to the formative process in the second semester. It is important for teachers to continue to give feedback and work in partnership with the administration to focus on what is working and what might need to be adjusted to the policy. Through a constructive partnership, a grading policy can be implemented and modified to best meet the needs of our students as we prepare them for their future, whatever that may be. On another note, we'd like to thank all the teachers and the entire school community for administering the PSAT and SAT last Wednesday. What I understand, it was a success. We had no irregularities, so that's a good thing. Finally, the LTA would like to recognize the hard work and dedication that the administrative assistants provide on a daily basis. The admin assistants are the unrecognized experts of the school, the ones who really know how the school works. We ask that the board to consider their contributions to the school as you review their compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Next, we have a non-stop student of the world. Student representative of the board, Amina, is not available this evening, so Dr. Waterman is going to be stepping in.
Thank you, Vice President Kelly. Yeah, Amina had a badminton quad at Oak Lawn, and she told me she would probably not make it back, and it looks like she hasn't made it back. So we're hoping that she is successful in Oak Lawn tonight. So she asked me to report on a few things. In clubs, our GEMS club hosted an Introduce a Girl to STEM event The 35 middle school girls attended last week. NHS hosted a National Day of Service on April 9th with 350 National Honor Society members participating. Our wind ensemble placed as a finalist in the Illinois Superstate Band Competition. Future healthcare professionals participated in an activity on how to draw blood and start an IV drip. Science Olympiad placed second in regionals. Business management took a trip to the Chicago Wolves game and learned about the business of sports. Student councils preparing for the first all-school assembly in a couple of years on Friday. Best Buddies hosted an Easter egg hunt for local students. And then in sports, girls softball, girls water polo, girls soccer, boys volleyball, and girls badminton all had victories over the last week. And then some big upcoming events. Prom tickets are starting on sale this week. Of course, all-school assembly on Friday. 16 different students signed letters of intent to play their respective sports in college. And then Brownstock was recorded on April 14th. So that's a quick rundown of some of the events that Amina wanted to highlight here tonight. If it's okay, I'll move right into my superintendent report. So yeah, it's hard to believe that we're down to about 6 weeks left in the school year. There's obviously going to be so much happening during that time. And we're going to have a chance in May to host so many of our traditional end-of-the-year events. But right now, we're honestly keeping an eye on next year. Next Monday, the building leadership team will be hosting a class of 26 open house for our current 8th graders to welcome them. And then here in the next few weeks, we'll be communicating details around online registration, which is coming up as well. During the month of April, LT is celebrating Arab American Heritage Month by concentrating on celebrating Arab identity, thwarting negative stereotypes, and providing teachers with Arab history and cultures, all in support of our Arab American students. On April 13th, LT hosted a Ramadan Reflections virtual event for teachers and community members to connect and celebrate the Muslim faith and to learn more about Ramadan. There's also some LT Read student and staff book club. They've selected the novel Internment, written by Samira Ahmed, who's a local writer. And then also that book focuses on the story of one teen girl who's forced into an internment camp for Muslim American citizens and brave enough to speak out about that. I want to express appreciation to Dr. Rowe and to a variety of staff who've assisted with planning events for Arab American Heritage Month here at LT. Also, as Andrew mentioned, throughout the last several weeks, LT's has administered the Illinois Science Assessment, the SAT, the PSAT 9, and the PSAT 10. So about 3,000 students tested last week. We're, of course, in a pause until advanced placement exams begin in May. But all of this takes a tremendous amount of effort and coordination to complete. And I want to take a minute to first thank Katie Smith and Nancy Kalkowski in the Office of Assessment and Research for their work, but also to so many others who helped proctor, helped set up spaces, worked on non-standard testing, and all of the detailed tasks that go into administering tests to 3,000 students. So, literally there isn't a department here at LT who didn't assist last week in some way, and I appreciate the efforts of so many who contributed to a successful week. We have a couple of community events that LT is participating in coming up in the next 2 weeks. The League of Women Voters in LaGrange and the Community Diversity Group is hosting a panel discussion on Thursday night, the achievement gap, what our schools are doing about it. Our associate schools at LT as well as LT will be participating on the panel Thursday evening. And then on Saturday, April 30th, LT will be hosting Building an Inclusive Community Conference at South Campus. So we're certainly excited to be a part of those community events as well. At this point, I'm going to conclude with, I'm going to go through my FOIA report first and then end on a celebration. So we've received 3 different FOIA requests since our last board meeting. We had a parent request hallway and bus footage regarding a specific incident that occurred. We had an organization request insurance and surety bond claims, court filings, invoices, and payments associated with LT for Cook County Circuit Court case number 2021-04844. And then we had a local reporter request minutes of the March LTA Association Exec Board meeting as well. So ending with a celebration. So it's my honor in April to present a Vita Plena Award to a deserving staff member. The Vita Plena Award has been presented by the superintendent to a deserving individual since the mid-1990s. The individuals who received this recognition in previous years have talked about what it means to them, and they consistently emphasize the themes of dedication and going above and beyond to support our students, our families, and our community. Our recipient this evening has done this and much, much more during her career at LT. Vanessa Benson was hired as a paraeducator in 2008. She was one of the first group of paraeducators who was hired with a school bus driver permit. And in her role, that's an important component because Vanessa works with students and staff in our transition program. The transition program is available to our students aged 18 to 22 who have already met graduation requirements and are continuing to work towards individual goals in areas such as vocational training, independent living skills, transportation training, and community-based training as well. Vanessa provides both on-campus and community-based support for students and staff within the program and is always someone who goes above and beyond in her role as a paraeducator. Outside of that role, Vanessa has served on interview committees and is just always willing to do whatever's necessary for, again, our students, our staff, and our community, and always with a smile on her face. So I think Vanessa is one of the very best examples of the support that our paraeducators provide, and we are proud that she is part of the LT family. It's my honor to present Vanessa Benson with a Vita Plena Award this evening. Congratulations, Vanessa. Vanessa, congratulations again. Thank you for everything. And that concludes my superintendent's report for this evening.
That's a good one. That's a good way to finish that one. Thank you. Congrats. Our first unfinished business, our first agenda item under unfinished business is a second reading of summer workshop proposals. Scott Eggerdine?
Thank you, Vice President Kelly. I am looking for approval of summer workshops this evening. We first heard about them last month at both the committee meeting and at the board meeting. As I mentioned last week, we did have a couple of small changes. With the geometry and construction course not running, we did pull that proposal. The remainder are here essentially as presented. You'll note that the amounts paid for by grants and district funds are put forward here as well. We're looking to have $54,107.50 paid for by grants, $34,802.50 by our district funds. And as we've seen over the years, based on teacher availability and also not every teacher being at the high end of the scale that we use to determine the overall costs, it's anywhere between 65 and 75% of the amount approved that's actually spent, which would come to district costs being around $28,000. Money matters aside, this is the opportunity really for us to support our staff in a number of different ways. We have our professional learning team working on putting together our goals for the year with our professional development. Our equity ambassadors team will be getting together and working through quite a bit of curriculum-oriented work that they want to work on throughout the year. We will have 3 teams moving into an 8F grading pilot, American Studies Prep, English Language Reading, and English for Special Ed. We will also be putting together some refresher sessions for a summer professional week that will be led by our teachers, for our teachers. And as I mentioned last week, we are estimating that 200 participants will take place. That'll be about $10,000. If we have more, we will most likely be able to make up the difference. We'll certainly pay them based on what isn't used in other areas. So the amount that I'm asking for tonight will be a not-to-exceed amount. In the curricular areas, we have a Spanish 2 alignment workshop. U.S. History has updated standards, so they will be getting together at all levels this summer. English language reading is a new course back for the first time. English 2 honors and English 4 world lit will also be continuing work that they've been doing with their curriculum review as well. We have the new course of healthcare careers with over 180 students who've signed up, so we're very excited about that program and getting that off the ground. We also have our new urban agriculture course and data probability, also giving those teachers time to get that curriculum together. Our biology folks have been together doing storylining now for 4 years. This is an opportunity to do a little refresher, make sure all teachers are on the same page with storylining. And our math alt assessment is coming up with different ways of measuring math outcomes, so students don't have to always retake an entire test. These would be other ways that they can demonstrate what they've learned. This would be for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Trig Pre-Calc. Yoga is a brand new course, extremely popular, and so we'll put that course together. Because we started a sophomore strength training, the teachers in junior, senior strength training want to build on that foundation because we also had an extremely high number of students take that for sophomore year the first time. And as you know, we've been talking about freshman SEL in the PE classes for a number of years. This is an opportunity for the teachers, now that we're back fully in session for a year, to see how things are going and really look at their SEL implementation and make tweaks where they need to. Our life health course is bringing in some new topics, and then in the student services area, we're embarking on a co-teaching experience in freshman year, and so not only do we have 9 teachers involved in co-teaching and being co-teachers next year, we will also have 19 folks going through a training on co-teaching. So as you can hear, it's quite a wide array of topics, but it is really essential to the work that we're doing here at LT, and this is I bring these forward to be approved as what we're looking for the fall of 2022. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. I continue to have questions on A to F, big surprise. And let me try to articulate my questions maybe for you, Brian, and others a little bit differently. I think I'm struggling just with the longer-term view. You've shared that about 30 classes or courses have switched to A through F, but there's about 250, which sounds like that means there's 220 left. And I'm just struggling to kind of understand, even just from a high level, when, like, over how many years, and is it always in the summer that these would transition? So is there really a benefit to approving 4 teams to go this summer? I'm just struggling with the longer-term view to see when everybody else would transition, and I just am trying to balance certainly support of the teachers and what they want to be doing with some of the many board concerns around various aspects of this, and maybe just a continued need for further understanding. And then I want to ask a little bit about how curriculum ties into all this in terms of sequencing, and we had that discussion on curriculum last time that we haven't done it's the term curriculum review in 15 years or maybe ever. And I'm struggling also with, for all the work you've described, all this work that goes on to get to A through F, which I appreciate is the case, are we going in the wrong order with the curriculum? And is there really benefit to supporting a few teams going this summer, not knowing when all the others will go and the sequencing with curriculum? So hopefully that was a lot, but hopefully a little better articulated than last week.
This is essentially curriculum work, what's happening this summer. So this is essentially curriculum work, so I'll let Scott talk about that, but you hit the nail right on the head. Like, that curriculum work has to happen first, and this is the first team that's going to go through that process, but we anticipate more teams going through it next year at the freshman year, and then building in that stair step. So, last week, we threw out probably 4 years to get most teams on, but, again, as we continue to evaluate this, that plan could change too. But yeah,
But
so
meaning
this
like-
summer that's curriculum work for that team, right?
Yeah, for these three teams, American Studies Prep, EL Reading, and English 4 Special Ed, they've done that curriculum work, so they are at the point where to do the 0 to 100 grading system on what they've done in their course, they feel it would make more sense to move A to F. And
Okay.
if you recall, when we started the concept of A to F, we had a number of teams already doing it experimentally. So we had a chemistry team, a physics team, a psychology team, and they were all kind of doing it differently. And we tried to shape it and make sure that there was some consistency among the teams that were doing that. They'd already changed their curriculum, they'd already made that shift. And so to not give them the support they need to move in that direction, I think would be disheartening for them as well. This isn't, priming a pump or getting a whole lot of things through piecemeal. This is really teams that are ready, and based on their chairs, they've asked for this. And so and we'd like to support them in that
Okay.
endeavor.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Brian, with 4 years, and I know that's a rough estimate, does that mean, 55 teams each of the next 4 summers will be, is this when the work is done in the summer? Just acknowledging how busy teachers
I'll
are
let you
throughout
talk
the
about
year.
that.
I would really prefer to explain all of it at another meeting with details rather than a thumbnail, but essentially, we're starting with just core instructional next year, freshman year. But it's something we haven't really had a chance to roll out and talk through with our chairs yet.
Oh, okay,
But
sure.
it's something that we've been talking about all year as coming up. The 4-year cycle is we want to start with freshman year with core and expand from there. We also know that in addition to that, we are looking at sequences of courses. And so for many of our electives, that's how they will go through that process, because they will look at their sequence of courses. So there are a couple of prongs to this. There's no one way to have, like you said, 55 teams changing all of their curriculum all at the same time. We also know that we won't need to do it all in the summer, but we know people will want some time in the summer. And that's really how we want to balance our federal funding, our Title I and Title II funding, really to support those teachers in doing that work. Because we believe that it is important to have a sequence of skills, 9 through 12, to have a sequence to really know the difference between a prep and Excel and an honors. So that's the vertical and horizontal articulation that needs to happen.
Okay.
We also want to make sure that we are looking at assessments, and are the assessments measuring the outcomes of the course or not? And again, those are all really important pieces that we want to take a look at, and that the teams for this summer have already done, or like in the instance of EL Reading, it hasn't been in place for a while. That's really an individualized support, so there are targets for those kids, and so it makes more sense to do that rather than translate that into 100 points and then into a grade.
Okay, so it sounds like, thank you for all of that detail. The teachers and their division, the teachers have asked for this, that are part of this summer workshop. The division chairs are supporting it, and the curriculum, it sounds like, is ready and appropriate to make this shift.
Correct.
Thank you.
Scott, I didn't understand that about the core, are we starting something in the fall with, what were you saying about?
Yeah, that's the curriculum review process, so we're going to start with core graduation requirements, and that's something I would like to share at some point still this spring, probably in June.
Okay, and that would be the curriculum review process? Okay.
So, sorry, just making sure the mic's, to ask a question then, so the teams that are working on it this summer, this is like the last step because they've done the work, and you're going into curriculum review for the core freshman classes. Are there other teams that are maybe where American Studies were? Are there other teams already working towards this who are doing that alignment now outside of the curriculum review, or is that the process? And without getting into the detail that will come later, I'm just kind of wondering if there are teams in the queue.
So we have teams, biology is an example, that has been doing this work. The question is whether they want to make that leap.
Okay.
Right now, that's one of the ones we discussed too, that had fewer number of summatives. And the concern that was brought up by parents was that there's not enough information. If they were on an A to F, parents would be getting more information, there would be more feedback, because then they would be repeating these skills over and over through the storylining process and getting more feedback through those skills. So yes, there are some that are still working on it. There are some that are already there but aren't quite ready to make the shift. There are some that are going to begin that process this summer. That American Studies group will, or the American History, U.S. History group will be looking at bringing in their standards. So that will be a conversation. I don't believe they'll be ready to make that shift by the fall, but we'll certainly, again, we want to just make sure that when we're aligning the curriculum to the standards, to the assessments, to the outcomes, that when all of that is combined, then you can start having these bigger conversations. Right now, that's one of the challenges we've seen, and Andrew mentioned a little bit of it today too, is that teachers are feeling some frustration because they're still trying to apply 0 to 100 grading methodology to A to F concepts and vice versa. And that's really where a lot of the friction has come. Again, that's where you get into the question of retakes and all those other kinds of things too. But again, sure.
So that's like kind of my concern as well, is that it seems like it's not consistent, and you have a whole slew of teams that are not at that point, and then you have some that are, but then we've communicated out to, students and parents that this is the direction that we're heading in. I think that parents, are confused too, that they just don't know where their student is at, or some classes that they're taking are in one cycle of 0 to 100 and then A through F. So I mean, if we're going to do it, then why wouldn't you be doing it all at the same time and just have maybe put brakes on it to then roll it out at the same time? Because it seems like it's such it's even 2 times greater challenge to deal with, because you have the 2 systems happening at the same time, even with the students who are going through 2 systems.
It's certainly a perspective. Before we formally went to give some structure to this, we had dozens of systems. We had, within the same course, 4 different ways of grading in some courses. We had some real inequities in that sense. We didn't want to take the people who had already put the time in to go to a A to F style assessment and tell them to stop and back up till we were ready for everybody. What we've learned, and the pandemic didn't do us any favors, is that the curriculum piece is really what this is all about. And so, we have some teams, our psychology team is one of them, that's really doing a phenomenal job with this and has learned an awful lot. And so they're going to be helpful with other teams that go through it. In looking at other schools and how they've transitioned, Stevenson was also mentioned earlier, and we've been out to visit them. Stevenson High School is fully shifted to this A to F curriculum. It took them up to 10 years of slowly transitioning. So we want to be deliberate and methodical about it, and I would be just as concerned about doing everybody at the same time as I would, in another method. So, we want to be very clear and deliberate, but as we review and people are ready, we also don't want to hold them back. And again, the clarity for how the grading is done is in the syllabus and it's in the curriculum apps, and so, we believe that that's a way that people can figure out how things work. But again, that's what we're requesting tonight, is for these 3. So
I just want to amplify your comment, Michael. I think it's something I tried to raise at least last week, is communication. And again, kind of back to the overall plan. You hinted at what, if I heard you right, Scott, and I don't want to get ahead of your plans, the concern around having students on the 2 different, it exists today, right? It's in my household at 67% of my my family is in that situation already. I'm sure others have it too. So you have to know who's on A to F and what the other ones are and how to understand the differences. I think we could do more in communicating on that front, but if I heard you right, you're going to try to minimize the impact on transition at some point by introducing this kind of to some year's freshman class in their core subjects, and maybe I misunderstood. And then the growth in more A to F would kind of grow with that class. Is that fair, or did I totally misunderstand your core freshman, et cetera?
It could, and again.
Or that's an
this is
example of what
about-
could
It's
work.
about readiness, and we've heard also from Andrew tonight that some teachers need more time and they need more training, and so we need to give that to them. Some people don't need the more time or the more training, so we're trying to balance as best we can, knowing that, people were moving in this direction. And so, as far as a 4-year plan, I don't believe that in 4 years we'll have everything complete. I believe that in 4 years we will have reviewed our core courses and made some significant decisions about how grading will happen in those courses. We will also be looking at the sequence of our courses, especially in our career pathways, and in many of our electives, to see how the skills pass through those as well, and that can lead to those. Again, if we're focusing on those specific skills aligned to standards, then it makes a whole lot more sense than what some teams were trying to do this year. And so we've recognized that, we're taking a step back, and we want to be deliberate in moving forward.
And I just would ask that just the communication be extra to parents, again, who I think are in need of updates on that long-range plan and shorter term, next semester or next year, I think is really helpful to a lot of people, as Michael alluded to.
So Scott, are you saying with the teams that have already embarked on this endeavor and those that are planning to finish the work, but have already embarked on the curriculum piece of it, that they have the curriculum that they have done is equivalent, as deep, as aligned to the standards as the curriculum review that you're discussing embarking upon?
Yeah, we're comfortable with where it is.
So those curriculum maps and everything associated with those courses then are aligned to the standards, to the degree that you wish them to be and would expect them to be if they were part of a typical curriculum review process.
Sure.
So you wouldn't expect a significant amount of curriculum changes as you review these courses to those, because I'm hearing you say it's kind of like you've already done it.
Right, and those teams have put in that work in that time. And again, many of them have been experimenting for multiple years. Some of them are on their 5th year.
So their curriculum maps and everything that we would have about those classes are aligned to the Common Core standards, for instance?
Right, or psychology standards, or
whatever the standards are in place
NGSS
for.
standards, or,
Okay.
right, it depends on the area.
Okay. And then another clarifying question, for those courses that are those are 30 individual classes, right now?
Correct.
And the teams that want to do this over the summer, how many classes does that equate to? You said 3 teams. About how many courses does that equate to?
I would have to look at the enrollments. I don't know.
Okay. For those 30 courses that are A through F right now, their transcripts for those kids will not contain minuses or pluses?
Correct.
Okay. The outstanding concern that I have, other than the timing of this, and I understand that, it's really great if you can put a really neat, methodical timeline to it, but with 250 courses, that is going to take an inordinate amount of time. I think one of the things that I heard the board asking for in our January meeting is how does this impact students at the college level? How are transcripts being viewed? You shared some information with us from a survey where a small number of actually, no, we're not even talking about the schools. You shared some information about, from that group last week, that talked about how transcripts are reviewed holistically and so forth. I didn't, though, hear any specifics about how schools may still be using the plus and minuses. And I've just been on the college search with my youngest daughter, and at least 2 of those schools that we visited still do use plus and minuses for different aspects of their admissions process. One school in particular uses plus and minuses to look at scholarships and merit-based scholarships that are going to be giving. So I still have an ongoing concern with not only the 30 courses that we have, that where students aren't receiving minus and pluses, but also anything that we do forthcoming without having that information. I mean, anything that I know we're all working towards the same goal. Anything that's done in this district, we want to know that it's being done with the best interest of kids in mind, that we're serving them with the best interest of kids in mind. So the fact that we still have colleges and universities still using the plus-minus criteria is a big flag in my mind, and I would appreciate a further subset of information. One of the schools that I talked to that's using it is a state university that a lot of our students go to. So I would hate to know that we've impacted students negatively in scholarship and merit money with this. That would be my first request. And for me, that would be a reason to hold this portion, if it's possible, to hold this portion of the summer workshop to the next meeting, if everybody is comfortable, and, you know, it can go to a vote or whatever, but that's where my head is on that particular piece. The second part of it is related to the 30 courses that we have ongoing now. Have we done a thorough review with tangible outputs from those 30 teachers, those teams, to understand where it's working, where it's not working? Do we have inputs on how it is serving the best interests of kids? I understand that through the reading and the research, we probably embarked upon this because of certain aspects that we hoped to accomplish, but sometimes best intentions also, other things, other unintended side effects can come along with that. And so I think knowing any information that you can provide about a thorough review of those 30 courses would be important in understanding how we move forward with this A through F teams.
Okay, I'll certainly take a look at that. I mean, the chairs have been reviewing, we've been doing a gradebook audit. We're also, looking at just the courses in general. We've, 6 or 7 of us have met with each of those teams in the fall. We're meeting with them again for individual interviews to get a sense of what they need and what's working and what's not working. So we will certainly conclude those in the next few weeks. I don't have anything to share specifically today, not knowing the question ahead of time, but I can certainly put something together.
I think, too, I just want to caution, like, these are teacher teams that have submitted requests to do this work this summer. And again, we want to support teachers who request this work and who want to go through it this summer. So I would, certainly if the board wants us to hold that summer workshop, we can do that. But I do have concerns about that because there are teacher teams that have requested this work for the summer.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we hold it for any length of time that would preclude them from doing the work, but I am suggesting that there are still some important pieces of information that are potentially important impacts to our students that we should have a good understanding of before we embark further on this. I certainly, appreciate the interest and investment and time to do this. So hopefully the information that would be brought back would allay our concerns about potential negative impacts and help us feel better about the positive impacts.
Is there any negative repercussion from waiting 1 month just on this one subset? Do we lose the grant? Do we?
No, we just need to make sure that people are able to set aside the time this summer and that they know that it's going to happen or not going to happen. The meeting is
May 16th?
the 16th of June, of May, oh yeah, May.
May 16th.
May
is the
16th
regular action
would
meeting.
still be, we would still be able to make that work.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about Dawn, like with your concerns about going forward with it?
Mm-hmm.
So I see a lot of positives going forward with it because we can still change. So is your only concern going forward with it the plus and minuses? Because they're still looking at the curriculum aspect of it.
Yeah, the curriculum aspect, I feel, given Scott's input, that the curriculum review that these teachers did was as deep and as rigorous as would be part of a curriculum review process. It sounds like that is taken care of. Last meeting, when we talked about the curriculum maps, and that the curriculum maps were, that the exercise or the effort was for the teachers to put down what they were currently doing in the courses, with Scott's acknowledgement that may or may not be where we want to go, or where, that may or may not be aligned. That definitely threw up some concerns and some red flags with me. I'm very happy that we're going to be embarking on a curriculum review and looking at aligning everything. But it does seem, again, to use something that Scott said last week, that we have put the cart in front of the horse in some of this. And I think that was acknowledged. That's what you said, and today you said that you realized that the curriculum piece is what this is all about. So I just think it's prudent to pause, especially since we have 30 teams up. Right now, if anybody in our community asked me the positives, how A through F is best for kids, I wouldn't be able to answer that fully and confidently, and I'd like to be able to. And I want to be able to negate the concerns as well. So I think pausing to get a little more information, as long as it's not going to hurt the process, then and allay some of the concerns that I've heard, not just from myself, but several of you expressed tonight, would be a smart thing to do.
Your concern is more with the A to F, not just the plus and minus. Like, that's what I'm hearing. I'm just trying to understand, like.
It's both, but the fact that we still have so much disparity in how universities and colleges are looking at our kids and making decisions of our kids, the fact that that has changed dramatically since the pandemic, and I don't think any of us fully understand how it's changed. I just want to make sure that we're very confident that the transcripts not containing minuses and pluses are going to be a positive impact to our students, and certainly not a negative.
Because my question is, if we pause it, will we get that? I guess that's where I'm understanding. Will we even get that information for the next meeting?
Well, it's a month away. I mean, so I verified with one call in 5 minutes to one of the state universities that a lot of our students go to, how they still use plus or minuses. And I'm not asking for an exhaustive, 300 schools.
That's what I'm just, like, can we
Yeah.
achieve that? What are we I guess what are we, one?
Well, sorry to interrupt, Jill. I think last week we also said, like, if there are specific schools you want us to look into, we can certainly look into those.
I think we have a good understanding through our college and career readiness program. It would be very, it would seem like that it would be an easy endeavor to understand, the top 30 schools that our kids go to. The school that I spoke with was the University of Iowa. It's a school that a lot of our students go to. I know we've had community members write into us. They've cited other schools, some of them private and smaller, but, nonetheless. But I think it's having an intersection of especially, a fair number of universities that our kids go to, I think would be important. I don't think any of us would want to look back on this and understand that our kids getting into these schools were affected in any negative manner from this.
I absolutely agree. I'm just trying to understand from everybody, to hear everybody's side, like, where, one, if we pause, can we achieve that for the next meeting to even have it happen this summer?
Well, and beyond that, I saw a couple of you shaking your heads, a couple of the board members shaking their heads. Again, the fact that I can't articulate, and I don't know if other people,
I agree.
Of like how moving to A through F is best for our kids, how we're serving the large percentage of our kids, why that's best. We should be able to articulate that and understand that.
Well, I'm just trying to get, as a board, like, to help us come up with the concise questions so that we can be concise, because I felt like the conversation last week was very lengthy and really left me with a lot of questions, like, did we even make progress? There was a lot of conversation and there was a lot of dialogue, but we as a board haven't really come. I'm just trying to have some dialogue with us here. One, what is our concern as a board to come to hear, what's our concern? Like, just really to kind of hone it down to a couple simple questions. One, what do we need more information on? And two, what are our concerns for, so that we are concise going back then to Scott and, to the rest of the team to look for that. I'm just trying to get a better handle on that with all of us.
I'm going to be quiet in a second because I think I saw you taking notes, Scott, and I'd be happy to summarize some requests here tonight or in an email. But I do want to point out that this is the first time we have really had a lengthy discussion as this board about grading. So I feel the same way. Last week's meeting was very informative, lengthy, I left with more questions in some areas than I received answers for as well. As Julie mentioned last week, she stated, like, we should be talking about grading every week. I think we should. It's been a huge change. I don't think it's any aspect of this doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all or either-or proposition. Okay, I kind of lost my train of thought. I think I'll just leave it at, I think some of the things that I'm asking here tonight, specifically about A through F, are my outstanding questions that I think would help clarify a lot. And I don't know if you all want to add.
I'm just
Well,
trying to,
let
like,
me
yeah.
just interject here and say that right now, the focus is on the agenda item that we're on, which is summer workshops. So I think we just need clarity on, are we holding that summer workshop for those 3 teams? And then we can move on to the grading part of the agenda and have other discussions about pluses and minuses and college impact and things like that. But right now, we do need to make a decision on the summer workshop. So those 3 teams, do we want to hold off on those? That's what we need to decide that first.
I think we benefit from another month, and I know you're trying to separate because they're different, but I think what I don't want to do as a board member is to give my vote, and it's not that it's $4,300 whatever dollars is too much. I don't know that it's responsible for me to vote yes for something that we talked about for 2 hours last week. We've had questions on. I learned more tonight. I'm getting more comfortable, but if we could get some of Dawn's questions answered about feedback, it would make me feel like I'm not, that I'm voting with more information. And as a side output, the plus minus, which Dawn brought up again, I don't have a list of schools for you guys to call. I think it's short-sighted to have talked to 3 and make a pretty dramatic decision, and then to have 2 months for follow-up and not much, Scott, as you admitted, you couldn't find much more on it, but you keep looking. That sounds almost a little dismissive to me, or could be read as dismissive. I don't know that you guys are always hearing, and maybe the amount of discussion on A through F and this $4,000 line item will help kind of raise better awareness that we don't have all the pieces, and if to Jill's point, maybe we're not being clear with how we could get to the more.
I would like us as a board just to come, I think going back to Brian's question, I just feel like we're all over, just trying to kind of bring it back in together. I think Brian's question, what is the negative if we go forward with the workshop? Okay, and then we still have carry on our discussion about the A through F and the plus through minus. So is there positives that will come from them coming together, even if we don't, like what are the positives, even if we as a board continue to, as administration, we continue to discuss the A through F and the plus and minus?
From the district's perspective, like from the, for those,
for that summer workshop.
well, the teams are eager to do the work. I mean, that
And what
to me,
work is that, to clarify?
that is to better understand how to set up an A to F grade book, how to best communicate those grades to parents and students, how to align Canvas with the Infinite Campus, because there are some challenges with that. And there's things that we had the original teams go through as an A to F, and I'd be happy to share what that is too. There is a description of it in the proposal, but again.
Which is like bullet points. So really, they're doing the work for the A to F grade book bullet point.
Right.
So if we're not, as a board, aligned on the A to F, and we have a lot of questions about that, then it wouldn't be necessary for them to do the summer workshop, correct?
We wouldn't have them move in that direction in the fall, or they would do it without the support. And again, we'd have to make that decision. I had not expected to have that conversation
I didn't know if there'd be other things
tonight.
coming out of the summer workshop that could be
Right.
beneficial.
I think that's an important point. These teams they want to do the work, they've expressed interest in doing the work, they may do the work anyway. We're not prohibiting teams from doing this work, because that would require us to tell all 30 teams that they can't do this work. So it's really not about whether the teams want to move forward, it's really about whether we want to provide them the support this summer to do it. Scott, I'm going to ask you, put you on the spot here. Do you have a preference with whether we separate these 3 teams out, or just simply hold off on all summer workshops until May?
I would be comfortable separating these 3 because the board's not comfortable.
So
I wouldn't want to hold everything else up. We have deadlines for payment, and we have to get contracts out, and we really can't delay everything. But if you would be comfortable waiting a month, we can try to do additional due diligence and share more information, maybe even give a presentation specifically of what would happen in that workshop. Again, I'm trying to answer your questions. I don't know, I just want to get the right.
And that's why I asked the question. So my recommendation now is let's move forward with approving, or asking the board to approve the second reading of summer workshops minus the part that we were just talking about.
And not approving the grading portion right now will not affect it if we continue it for later. Planning, payments, anything.
It won't.
Okay. Then I would suggest that also, that we just separate those out, right? So can we have a motion to approve the summer workshop proposals as presented, but without the A through F grading portion right now? Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
And could we have the roll call, Marilyn?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, so new business. Our first agenda item under new business, the FY23 capital outlay requests, grants funded, and district furniture recommendations. Brian Stashek?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. What you had before you is exactly what we talked about at the committee of the whole meeting last week. This is the first of the capital requests that are being presented to the board. And typically in April, we present two groups of capital requests. I should say, really, it's capital requests and furniture requests for purchase for the 22-23 school year. And so, first of all, you have on lines 2 through 6 of your spreadsheet there, you have the grant-funded capital requests, which total $56,024. It's an estimated number because we don't really know what the cost is yet, but we think we're in the ballpark with that. And then the second section consists of lines 9 through 29, which is really furniture-related items to be used in the 22-23 school year. And that is estimated to be about $147,000. And so we typically ask the board here in April for approval to begin purchasing these items and budgeting for those for next year so that we can, number one, apply for the grants and have those numbers available for the grant. And then number two, have the furniture available for the start of the school year. I think that's going to be a little bit challenging this year regardless, but we're certainly going to, hopefully with approval from the board tonight, move forward as quickly as we can on that. And then just to be clear, from our discussion, again, last week at the Committee of the Whole meeting, we will be bringing forth in May additional capital equipment requests for the board. And those items, typically, we don't have a problem obtaining those, at least we've not in the past. And so we'll bring those forward in May after we've had some additional administrative review on those. And we'll have, again, like I said, we would ask the board to approve those items in May. But tonight, we're looking for approval, as I said, for these grant-funded capital requests and then also the purchases for furniture in the district for the 22-23 school year.
Brian, just to clarify too, why don't we look at all of those together? Is it because these are mostly the grant-funded?
Yeah, it's more of a timing issue where we'd like to get going on these sooner rather than later. And so that's really why we have these forward tonight. And then in May, we'll bring those other ones forward. And so that's typically the process of what we've had since I've been here anyway, and I think the process predates me as well.
Any other questions? Okay. Can we have a motion to approve the FY23 capital outlay requests, grant-funded, and district furniture recommendations as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, can we have a roll call?
Member Vita-Daniels? Yes. Member Gretsch? Yes. Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Robert?
Yes.
Member Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Our next agenda item under new business is the 2022-23 additional textbook and instructional materials request. Scott Agardine.
Thank you, Vice President Kelly. The textbooks here are, as we mentioned last week, are mostly based on meetings with the bookstore staff and making some shifts to class sets and dropping some courses that are some books that have not been used or some instructional materials that have not been used. There are a few new requests. Those are in the consumable area, and we had some considerable discussion about these last week as well. For the language arts area, for English 3 Prep and Excel, American Lit and Composition, English 4 World Perspectives, and English 4 Multicultural Lit, they would like to adopt the book Uncharted Territory. That's a book that, as we discussed last week, we will be purchasing class sets of the hard copy and then digital copies, digital access, which will then be accessible through Canvas. The question was raised last week about a 6-year adoption. With a 6-year adoption, we would pay for everything up front. That's $35,000. It would be $8.33 a year for that access. I did inquire about 4 or 5-year plans. 5 years would be $8.80 per year, and 4 years would be $9.50 per year, and it would be more expensive going forward. Based on that, in talking with Karen Reno, the chair of the department, and her conversations with the teachers, they feel this would be a very useful purchase and something they would use for at least 6 years. So my recommendation, as in the packet, would remain that we adopt that book with the 6-year lifespan of the online fees. The other one we talked about at length last meeting had to do with the PC repair and maintenance, and that was the Comptia A+ Guide to Information Technology. That is the 11th edition, the new edition. There are a couple of ways we can do this particular book. The least expensive is the way as it's being brought forward as a $120 consumable. The students would pay that. Talk to the chair, talk to Ed Tennant in particular, given the technological angle of this and the fairness of this, and then also did a study of our course fees for other areas. $120 is in line with other courses such as driver education and Woods, and then with many of our languages that have both digital and workbook and textbook components, and also music theory is around the $100 point as well. It is something that is unique to this particular course is the fact that the online access as a part of this consumable does allow students to do labs and actually work on the systems, the information technology component in a safe environment. And by safe, I mean that they're learning how to put together computer networks, dismantle computer networks, troubleshoot computer networks. What we've had to do in the past is create a network in the classroom that is not connected in any way to the school's network so that we don't damage our school's network. This does lead to the Comptia A+ exam, which is an industry standard, and as we learned last Monday, we've hired 16 students last summer using this training, so they are then able to work specifically here. This would be a step up for those students who are in the course to do it. So we realize it's not cheap. It has never been inexpensive for this course. It's always been around $85 to $90 for this book. Certainly, any student who's on fee waiver, that's part of our free and reduced lunch program, and that's part of our consideration with financials. And I don't believe we've ever turned anyone away who couldn't do it. Now the question is whether someone would sign up, whether it's announced or not. And I understand that it is a later request, again, because the publisher informed us of this 2 days before the packet was due for last meeting. So now everything is signed, sealed, and delivered. this is the recommendation from the chair, from the teacher, and also from the curriculum office. Other than that, there are no additional changes or things I was checking on prior to this meeting. There are two new adoptions that have not been adopted in the district before. The Freedom Riders Diary and Uncharted Territory, they will be on display in the boardroom for the next month for anyone to take a look at. And we will not be making a final decision on this until next month.
Scott, the only outstanding question I have is, I think we kind of made the conclusion last time that the Comptia A+ $120 consumable does not include taking the test, that if the students who take this course want to take the test, they have to pay for that on their own? Is that right?
I would have to double check on that.
Scott, I know we talked about this last week, but I would just suggest the idea that if there was an expense like this $120 book, you know, I'm not sure if you do it for scuba or woodworking, driver's ed, the ones that have the higher priced tickets for books, that in the curriculum book or however the information gets to kids when they're making decisions, if it's just noted, hey, there's, you know, an increased fee for this class, just so that families don't go to sign out and pay for their books and all of a sudden they're $100 more into it. Just a suggestion. I don't know if you do that now for scuba or for some of the bigger priced.
Only for the ones that have that recurring fee. Again, this was not a fee when the APG went to print in December, so it's not in it this year, although we haven't had it in there previously when it was $85 to $90. And again, I'll find out for sure about how that test is, if that's an additional fee, if that's a requirement of the course, or if it's an option for the students. Again, a lot of these, like even with scuba, we don't put in the amount that you need for the scuba, the final dives to get your dive certification, because not everyone chooses to do that. You know, and again, those things are somewhat changeable, and sometimes those are requests that come later. But again, you know, obviously, the more information we can give people, the better it is. But I'll certainly find out the specifics prior to the final approval for this course. My only concern is if we don't approve it, I mean, I think we would have to consider other ways of paying for it, because without this book, the old edition does not work on new computers. So we can't keep old editions. That's one of the challenges with this. So we would have to figure out another solution if there's not an appetite to approve this book.
And I'm not saying not to approve at all, because I know it's necessary and it's needed. I'm just saying, you know, just for the future.
Sure.
You know,
I agree. I mean, anytime we can put that information in, that's helpful. And we do for some and not for others, and maybe we need to review all of that. I mean, we would love to go to a completely online academic program guide, and perhaps all those fees would be in there. But again, they would change from when they sign up for the course to when the course starts, and I think we would have similar challenges. So just want to, you know, again, be as transparent as possible. And I know, as like with the Woods project too, we have a posted amount, but if a student wants to do something in oak rather than poplar, then they can pay extra. So again, it's always a moving target with a lot of these things. So, but this one is a known amount, so.
And I think like last meeting, we talked about also looking at like maybe a threshold, because what is more?
yeah.
I mean, like if you have a class that's a $5 book, and then you have one that's a $25 book, is that more than the $5 book? Do we want to have a threshold of what would be considered more? You know, and maybe just have maybe a catch-all if it's an extra cost, you know, above and beyond what would be a traditional thing or something like that.
Like
I know, Brian, you had a good suggestion about that, but I don't
like in
remember.
terms of communicating that in EPG. Yeah, we had an initial discussion about this as a team, and one of the concerns we have is we don't want a student to be discouraged from taking a course because they see an amount in the APG, and then they automatically, without talking to anyone, they just don't sign up for it. And so we didn't really come to conclusions in that discussion yet, but we're going to continue to talk about that as a team.
Get that. Any other questions? All right, then. Can we have a motion to approve the 2022-23 additional textbook and instructional material?
This is
request?
just informational this month.
So it is informational, so
Yep. So no need to approve anything this month.
All right, just kidding.
that was my fault. That was my fault.
Can we motion anyway? No, good. All right. Our next agenda item is an informational item also, the 2022-23 summer reading list. Scott Eggerding.
All right, so what you have in the packet is the recommended books for our LT Reads summer reading program. Karen Reno brought this forward, and she and her team put together a list every year. The goal is really just for pleasure reading, to get students in the habit of reading in the summer. And then when they come back at the beginning of the year, teachers use it as a way to have some early conversations about literature, about what people did over the summer, et cetera. So there will be email blast reminders when you get into the website, the LT website. They have book trailers that will be made available so you can learn about the different books. It's a really wide range of brand new books to good old classics like The Grapes of Wrath. There are sequential books that are part of a series that might get a kid hooked. That's one of the ideas too. If a student reads one, they might want to read the second and third in a series, so we have a number of those. And then also, not everybody loves fiction, so we've got some nonfiction sprinkled in. We just encourage kids to don't just point and take a book, but learn a little bit about it, and if they start it and they don't like it, pick up a new one. There's no problem with that. We do have a good partnership with the Barnes & Noble in Oak Brook. They will have a table with all the LT books on display, which is a nice little advertisement for literacy and for the district. So that's the first part. The second part, we do have 2 AP courses that have just the way the AP language and lit courses operate. They expect students to have read widely when they take those exams, so this is an opportunity for them to read a book that would be thematically or topically, or even the actual physical book they want you to maybe be familiar with. So students can choose one of those. Again, no required single book, so these aren't up for approval or adoption. These are just informational, but it gives you kind of a wide range. The language and composition books generally are more along the lines of nonfiction or in that language, because the AP rhetoric, that's the AP Rhet course, so it's more like a freshman comp class in college. And then the English for Lit, those are all novels and are all fairly well-known and award-winning. So just bringing that forward for the board's information.
As we talked about last week, I really appreciate your work and Karen Reno's work and her entire team on organizing this. The communication is fantastic year after year. Picking these different books and the communication and the blast to the parents and everything is really done well. So thank you very much.
I'll definitely pass that along.
Can I ask just a quick one? Again, love the topic, and I found 5 or 6 books I'd like to read. And maybe I missed this in what you said. Is there any partnering, not just with Barnes & Noble, but perhaps with some of the local libraries?
We do that as well.
You do?
We
Okay.
share the list with the libraries as well.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I didn't know if like the North and South Campus libraries carry some of these, or if it's really more just go to your local library if you're someone who prefers to use that method to get the book.
They try to, because we're not here in the summer, it's a bit of a challenge. But they certainly are involved in selecting the books and creating the book trailers. But it's, I would have to check with Karen specifically. I know in some years we have purchased them and others we haven't. So I don't know if that's a budgetary issue or what, but, you know, this is, I don't know specifically about our own LT libraries for this summer.
Right, any other questions? Okay. Our final informational item is grading practices update. Scott Eggerding.
All right. We'll pick up where we left off. I mean, ultimately, what I shared last Monday were what we found with 3 basic questions. What are other high schools doing with changes to grading practices? How do colleges view changes to grading practices? And how are we involved in supporting teachers with the implementation of grading practices? As was mentioned a little bit earlier, we did survey a number of schools in the Chicago area about what they're doing with grading, and we got quite a bit of information. You know, probably the one thing that's, no one is doing anything very consistently. It's not like we are doing, we have people doing a number of different things. We have teachers, we have schools with 0 to 100 grading scales, 40 to 100, 50 to 100, A to F, 1 to 4, 1 to 5. So it's kind of a wide range, and the consistency is again, there's a logic to each school and how they're doing it, but there isn't one sort of overarching theme. In looking at colleges, what they're saying, especially in regard to A to F, is that it doesn't negatively impact them as long as you're explaining what you're doing. And so at your table tonight, Dr. Waterman made sure you had a copy of our school profile. And again, as was mentioned, one of the things we'll do with the school profile, we explain our grading practices. So we would be notifying which courses have gone A to F as a part of that as well. So that would be communicated. So then the schools would know which ones ostensibly wouldn't be having pluses and minuses. That would just be something we would figure out where to put it, whether it would go with the regular grading part, or if you notice where the courses are all listed, those are all the accelerated and honors courses, and so those would be, you know, we could make an indication there as well, just to make sure that it doesn't get missed. But that, again, that's something, we always update that a little bit, you know, we certainly, as we consider what the landscape of college admissions is, we want to make sure that our product is as solid as possible. In talking with our counselors, this does go out with every transcript, so it's something made available to the admissions officers. And then lastly, on how we're involving and supporting teachers with grading practices, we had a implementation meeting today. We went through the presentation from last Monday. We want to share that with our faculty so they have a better understanding too of the questions that were asked and shared here. And we are also, we had lengthy conversation about how to expand that committee to ensure that we are representing as many voices as possible. So that's something that we're working on as well. And then, as we mentioned Monday, Dr. Terrell is putting together that communication committee so we can get information out, not only to staff, but also to families and students prior to the end of the year, and begin having, you know, putting together the conversations and the information that we need to get people to better understand where we are and where we're headed. So I could talk for a long time, but I'm going to wrap it there. If you have any other questions, or I took lots of notes from earlier. If there's other things, you know, we can certainly look at or provide, we'll do our best to do that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or facilitate a conversation. That's the end of my report.
A comment. So in terms of looking at a broader set of colleges, in the profile you have the word cloud that has where a lot of our students go to, so that could be a jumping or a start to take a broader sample from that list.
Right, and I have not only that list of all those colleges, I have every college that our kids not only applied to, but also where they were accepted from, and then also where they chose to go. So we can do that. When we were looking at class rank a number of years ago, we did contact the 20 most frequent schools to see how that would impact. And actually, when we approved American Sign Language, that was another question that the board had at that time, was whether a college would accept sign language, and we did that as well. We learned that of the top 20 schools that LT sends kids to, Notre Dame was the only one that wouldn't take sign language. So again, that's really something I would be happy to figure out. That's not a problem. We've debated the word cloud or whether we list the colleges. One of the reasons why we don't list the top 20 colleges is we do send a number of kids to Big Ten Midwest schools. We don't want to put colleges in the East Coast, West Coast, or in the South down on a list or not on a list, because then we're concerned that admissions officers won't find their name and won't believe that a kid will come. So this was our attempt to get as many college names on a list as possible so that people know that perhaps they've come to their college. Now, they should have their own list of the students who've attended or come to that college from that area. That being said, they also want to get a sense of the kids in that class. Where do they go? And so that's why we sort of settled on the word cloud. There's always been a debate about the word cloud. But a list would make it even longer than it currently is, and we're worried that it would actually harm kids more than cloud.
No, I'm fine with the cloud as it is. I was just suggesting
Ask
if
those
you were
schools,
looking
right.
for a broader set of
Yeah.
universities, you could start from there.
I think in addition to that, the two other things that we had on our list from last week was the getting some feedback on the second semester retake policy and whether that's had the intended effect. And then obviously, what are we able to learn in terms of teacher needs and support through the gradebook audit? So those are two things that we're looking at.
We also started that conversation with the implementation team today regarding the impact of the changes, trying to figure out how best to collect that information. And we're getting there, I think. We don't think an individual survey would be the best, because the last time we tried that, teachers have they're on different teams. So if they're in a prep level course and an honors AP course, they're going to have they might have some different methodology and difference in retakes. So one might have more retakes than the other. So to ask one question, it wouldn't necessarily get at a granular level. So we were looking at either teaching teams or PLCs. Not every team meets during PLC time. And some teams are actually pushed together, so that may not be the best to do specific PLCs. So we're looking at either teaching teams or individual conversations with teachers through chairs. So that's kind of where we got around 4:45 today, but we'll keep that conversation going as to how we can best get information so that we can find out about the impact of the changes.
And I'm glad to hear you say that, Scott, too, because I think that's really what we're after. The retakes and whether or not we've reduced retakes is one perhaps quantifiable measure, but there's so many qualitative measures that I think that are important to capture here. And then, what else might be out there, that hasn't been addressed at this point. So I'm glad you're kind of framing it in the terms of how have the retakes affected the either positive or negative with the kids. I have a couple other comments, but I don't want to jump in if anyone else wanted to comment to what Scott said. As I thought through last week's meeting, thank you for the discussion. As I mentioned earlier tonight, it was really this board's first discussion on grading. And I've mentioned in board meetings before that the discussion that we have here as a board is critical. It's critical because, ultimately it hopefully will help us all get to a better understanding and a better place. And sometimes that we do get to a better place because of having the discussion. So I really appreciate that. I definitely wanted to acknowledge that there are so very many positive changes of the grading system so far. The consistent policy surrounding extra credit and eliminating that, or, having a consistent approach. Right now, it's eliminating that, I think has been, very, very beneficial. And I know in the past, you've shown data from students who have talked about being in a course where they don't have an opportunity for extra credit, or they don't have an opportunity for retakes, and another student in the same course does. So I think that's a hugely important and positive change. Our opportunities in this new grading system to retake tests, I think is, again, absolutely critical. Students should have the opportunity to display mastery and exhibit mastery, whether or not it's on that one point of time, that one-day test or not. And as we all know, there are lots of circumstances going on in our students' lives, and just having the opportunity because, maybe they got home very late from a school-sponsored trip one weekend recently, and they had to go take a test the next day, and that could be a very bad outcome. So I think the retakes is super important and a very, very positive change. And there's many, I'm just listing a few. Removal of zeros for missing work. It's nearly impossible for students to recover from a zero in the grade book. So that absolutely is so positive. And then removal from the behaviors and some of the attempts to remove bias from grades, such as attendance and participation, I think is also huge. And again, there's many others. There are still some ongoing concerns, I think, that have been a little bit expressed last week in our conversation. I think we've heard them loud and clear from parents, we've heard them from students, and we've certainly heard them from teachers. One of the biggest ones that I hear is accountability, and that in not providing an outlet for counting formative work such as homework is difficult to help teach. I think we have to be accountable, and the students need to be accountable, but part of what our teachers are doing is to help teach students how to be good students and how to be good learners and have that process along the way. And again, I think we always have to be careful of unintended impacts. So that is still an impact that I would like to understand more about, and that may be qualitative information from the teachers. We've seen it in the LTEA notes. We've heard it in a variety of different vehicles. But as was mentioned in a meeting a couple of months ago, we're in the people business. The largest percentage of our budget goes for our staff. Our teachers, they're on the front lines of learning. It is absolutely critical that we understand if there are any unintended impacts. The data that you showed last week, where we're only in 14% of the schools that answered your survey, the other 86% do something for homework. Again, I'd like to think that it's not an all-size-fits-all, that it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. We might be able to tweak things if we see some negative impacts to our students. I'm reminded well, actually, before I do that, the inconsistencies in the type of assessments and the number of assessments that you're providing input on and you're looking at, I think is super critical. It kind of negates some of the consistencies that I think that you were after, and I'm very happy that you're looking at that, but I still see it, I still hear it, I still think it's an issue. Retention and whether or not students are cramming. It's great that they have to turn in their formatives and a certain percentage of their formatives to have the possibility to do a retake, but how do we understand if they're retaining the information or if they're cramming for it because the learning process and not doing the homework along the way has perhaps put them in the position to cram. Also, the stress that's related to that and the retakes. I'm curious about core classes and employing a grading system that treats your core classes the same as your elective classes. I wonder if it's been considered that we could do different things with core classes versus some of our other classes. Students with IEPs and 504s, students in our subgroup population, students with executive functioning issues, how do we know that this system is working for them? What quantitative or qualitative information can we look at to understand that that this is the best thing for our students and this is the best way to serve our students? I also wonder about students who are not engaged learners. Is this having the intended impact on them? It seems like there should be a portion of the grading changes that were dedicated and thought of to help students who are not engaged. Is this working for them? Again, I mentioned that I think the teachers are on the front lines of our learning, and it concerns me that we still seem to have a large contingent of our teachers that are not on board. I heard the request tonight from Andrew to possibly consider extending the implementation grading team. I think I heard, Brian, and I'm not sure if this is right, but I think I heard that I think you had mentioned one time that there were about 16 teachers as part of this, and it's expanded, but I've since heard a number of, is it still right at 16?
It's 14 right there on the team currently. Scott?
Right now, we have one teacher from each division.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking to add one from each department, most likely, and then think in particular about some larger divisions, whether we're meeting, if we have the right representation. Does special ed have unique, we actually talked
Great.
specifically about that, specific needs. Life students don't get grades, so they wouldn't necessarily be a part of it. But again, how would we find the right balance and, again, make sure that we have as many voices represented at the table as possible?
That's great. That's great that you're expanding that, and it would be very, very important, I think, to understand the feedback from this year. Not just the changes from second semester, but how are we ending the year, and how do we know that we're best serving our students? The last ongoing concern that I have, actually, before I go to that, I know you had a research committee at one point that read the Gusky book, the Feldman book, and possibly one other.
Yes.
Has there been any consideration to bring that? I mean, that team did a lot of work in understanding the grading system. Has there been any consideration to tap into that group and bring that group back?
We hadn't talked about resurrecting that group from 6 years ago. However, some of the people on the implementation team were a part of that group, and there are certainly those who have gone the A to F route who were a part of those teams. What we've been talking about is how we go forward in the fall. And, if there is a particular training that teachers need, or if there's topics to be addressed. I was recently participated in a grading conference where they talked a lot about the concerns that you're raising, that boards are raising at other places, and how districts have shared information to help board members better understand the process. So again, I'm very intrigued in doing that, not only for you, for me. I think that's helpful for everyone. But perhaps one of those speakers might be someone we'd bring in the fall. All things that we want to really look at. We're going to talk a little bit about our calendar next month too. We want to look at ways that we can build that time into the school day. And so we've got a few ideas about that as well, and that would help us sort of finalize our plans. But we're definitely tapping in on those folks. Some of those folks who were a part of that group 6 years ago have continued to be a part of our professional learning in that group and actually help run some of the summer workshops. So,
the last concern that I have is how this relates to college. We've talked a little bit about that in the A through F conversations. But in college, by and large, students do have final exams still. I know, that there's some latitude in how our final exams are structured, but if there's a way to kind of understand if that is a potential problem point for our students moving to college, I think that would be important. Homework does still count in many, many courses in many colleges, so that's just more of a point. Retakes in colleges are generally not a reality all the time, so I'm concerned about this transition. And again, it just feels like, I don't want to say lower stakes, that's the wrong term, but here in high school, part of the effort is to give the students all the skills and opportunities and environment to learn how to be good students. It is lower stakes here in high school than it gets to than when they get to college. So for that reason, I have concerns, ongoing concerns about the college. The last thing I want to say, and thank you all for bearing with me and hearing this. The last thing I want to say is I'm 1,000,000% in belief and commitment that every single one of us here, all of our teachers, all of our parents, we all want the same thing. We all want to see that we're doing the best for our students. And I think that collaboration, particularly with some of our teams, like our teachers, who are, again, I'll say it, they're in the front lines of what's happening with our students and the learning. I think we all want the same thing. So to tap into that, and any change is going to be much more successful if we can bring people along and take the time to bring people along and make them part of the process to make it successful. So I think we all have the goal in mind, which hopefully, helps us to all collaborate and work more closely with each other so that we can get there.
Wow, great information, great questions. I really appreciate all of the specifics you brought in. I would agree. I think the one thought of the teachers and the collaboration and just hearing the teachers, and any ways we can do that, whether it's the expanding the implementation group, hearing them and understanding the issues, because they're seeing it on the daily basis, and understanding what all the different teams are feeling and finding, and how much time it's taking in their day would be really helpful. I think the biggest issue, and something from this document that you had given about the different schools, is that 14%, to me, one of the biggest worries is 14% of schools are using that 0% of the grade, or the formatives as 0% of the grade. And I'm having a hard time understanding why we're on the more aggressive side of that, and why there isn't that wiggle room of, trying some formative and some use of formatives and some use of that as grades. Because I'm just a big fan of homework and those formatives coming along the way versus just trying to get them in to get a retake. But that was the biggest issue for me, as far as the other, what other schools in the area are doing. That screamed loud to me.
Just one thing I'd followed up with that research group that we mentioned earlier, when we asked teachers what they were doing with homework when we were beginning to make this change. About half of our teachers said that they didn't count homework already. The other half that did count homework, only half of them, or about a quarter, gave any feedback to students. So that's what led us down that direction, that 3/4 of the work, either they weren't requiring homework, or they weren't already giving points for homework, or they were collecting homework and checking it in but not giving any feedback, which led us to really thinking about what exactly we were doing anyway with our homework. So that is what led us to the direction that we did, and Tom Guskey's, that's essentially his recommendation as well, and that's who those research groups came to. I just giving you some background, because some of you weren't a part of those conversations originally, but that's what led us to the direction that we went.
But is that conclusion absolutely rigid at this point? Is it part of making A through F work? And I just am asking because I don't know. Or is this an opportunity after, none of us on the board are probably hearing from too many teachers, or I should only speak for myself, saying, I love everything about the grading. We're hearing, frankly, from people who have frustrations. You're hearing it from the LTEA, hearing it from the survey, and you're hearing it from public comment. I haven't heard a response like, yep, this is it, we're never counting formatives, or we will always evaluate and we'll see how. Again, I appreciate the pivot at the semester. You're trying to incent students to do some of that work, or at least 50%. The reward is you can have a retake. I think that's anecdotally probably directionally helpful, but are we just set on it'll never count, or are we evolving Or not, I guess I'm
We're
just
always
curious.
evolving. I mean, I think the
Okay.
big concern is we're going to be, one thing we've thought about is we're inviting inconsistency. So like we'd be going back to a system to where we'd be inviting inconsistency. That's probably the biggest, aside from the research on that, but we're always evolving this.
Well, I don't know that you would be like inviting inconsistency. I think that, you know, you're looking at the model and it's, some of these models include the formatives counting in some form or another. You can still have your system that you have, but you're just part of that an equation you're including now into the grade. So I don't know that it's really inconsistent.
Well, here's why. Because we wouldn't be requiring teacher teams to count homework. Because before this, we've had teacher teams for many years that didn't count formatives. So in the absence of absolutely requiring teachers to do it, we would be having some teacher teams that would say, we want to continue to not count formatives, and we would have other teacher teams say, we do want to count formatives. So there would be some inconsistencies from course team to course team.
And
So
aren't you
that's
on the
one of
other
the,
side of
but
the-
again, that's one of the initial concerns, but again, we're always evolving this discussion.
But didn't you have half of them changed to this, like, isn't it the other side of the same coin? Like,
What do you
you had half of the teachers who never counted formative still don't, and half who used to now don't, and now if you went back, either way, you're moving.
Yeah,
as
so
you
right, I mean,
described,
right
half
now,
the-
we have consistency because no course teams count formatives towards the grade. So we would just simply be going back to a system where we would have some inconsistencies. But this is an evolving discussion.
But if you, I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding the inconsistencies part. If you said to teachers, well, today you can't count formatives, and if you
Yeah.
went back and said, going forward, you have to count formatives for 5% or for 10%.
That would be consistent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
just wanted to
Yeah,
make
if
sure I
we
wasn't
said teacher teams must count formatives, I have concerns about that because we have a lot of teacher teams that have done research and went way down the road towards not counting homework, and they would be concerned. They would be really concerned about that. So you're right, that would be consistent for sure if we required it. But I think there would be other unintended consequences of that.
And what we found through the surveys is many of the schools have it open, so you can or you can't. You can do it if you want, you don't have to. You can only count homework up to a certain percent, or you can not count it at all. This sort of gets into what we had 6 years ago, where, you know, the kid each period would have to figure out what the homework's worth. And when we were, even before 6 years ago, when the English department began to experiment with this about 8 years ago, they started not counting late work or not counting points off for work that was turned in late. What was happening was because others were counting it, no one was doing the English work. And so the English work was coming in 2-3 weeks late, whereas the stuff that counted. So the sort of unintended consequences of putting a limit rather than a hard and fast yes, no, 10%, 0%, is that you do get a lot of inconsistency, and that was where we saw inconsistency even among course teams, because one teacher said, well, I really value it, and someone says, I don't, and so then you had multiple examples going on in the same. So there's a lot of, again, we'll certainly look at what's most effective. The thing is, when we're looking to be consistent, when you give it a cap as opposed to a hard number, you get wide inconsistency.
So what I'm encouraged by is the work that's coming ahead, or that you're already embarking on. Like, Jen, you were talking about the audits. And so, and Brian, you made a comment last week that you don't expect to find inconsistencies across course teams, but we know that it's not the same, not every teacher team has the same policies, or that might be the wrong word to use, but they all have different subjects. They get to those assessments in different ways. So there's already that. But I would look forward to more conversation and understanding what you find in all of those audits too, because yes, there are probably teams that have done a lot of work so that they don't have formatives count. How do those weigh against the voices that we're hearing from the LTAEA and the other teachers that are saying, this is causing a problem? Yes, now in second semester, the kids are doing their formatives, but they're just checking a box. It's really not what it was meant to be. So just what that balance is. And I think that's the question is, as we learn that information, then is there openness to exploring, and that was something I was encouraged when we talked last week, Scott, when we got to the page about the vision where everything, we want it to be as consistent as possible, as fair as possible, and we want it to be reflective. How we get there is the work that we're talking about right now. So I would like to understand just timing of how long some of these milestones in the process, just right now, evaluation of this year, when we could learn more about what you're finding and maybe how that's going to map out.
I'm up. It's been a while. No, we are, at the division chair level, we are in the process of completing grade book audits right now. And what we're looking, it's really a time-consuming process because in addition to looking at all of our courses, we're then looking at individual teacher grade books within those courses to get to that level of consistency. But we're moving along and we're gathering some great information, not just on numbers of summative assessments, but the type of formative feedback that's being given along the way, which, as we all know, is super important. And additionally, we're looking at, I shared this last Monday, types of assessments. And I think that what we see, and certainly not across all areas, but what we're seeing is more diverse grade books in terms of types of summative assessments that we're using to assess student mastery of essential skills and content, which is something that we were hoping for with the changes. So I don't exactly have that time frame when we're going to be complete, because what we'll do is we'll take all that information and then work on our analysis and a report that we can share with you that kind of summarizes our findings. I think that compared that next to some of the feedback from teachers or PLC or course teams on the impact that the changes that we made for this semester, I think is going to be super valuable information for us moving forward. And then the third part of that, what supports do we need as we continue to move along in our journey? So I think that package over the course of the next couple months or however quickly we can get it done, I think is going to be really valuable and inform a lot of our work moving forward. And those were some of the conversations that we had with our grading implementation committee today. I think somebody made the point about communications, that we have some ideas of some things to bring to a small subcommittee tomorrow of some topics for communications. Internal communications will be a big thing with our staff. And then also, like Julie mentioned, external communications. What are we communicating to our students and families prior to the end of the year? And we know, right, after May, grading is not necessarily the front and center topic until we get back to school in August for our students and families. Yes, they may be thinking about it, but we want to make sure that we set the table for a productive start of the year by what we communicate in May in terms of plans for next year. And then, if we have some notes to share on long-term plans, and some of that might take a bit to be able to share, but we're talking about those communications that we need to make sure that we share out before the end of this school year. So I think that package of items is going to be really helpful for us as we assess next steps and then plan for next year as well.
And that's exactly what I was looking for, all those elements, how they're coming together, and then how you're going to use it. And it sounds like even before the fall is great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and just a comment on the consistency, and I think, Jen, everything you just described, I agree. That's going to be very, very valuable information. But I would imagine, just as you're going to find differences in those audits from course teams to course teams because of the nature of the subject matter that's being taught, that you're going to see diversity and a lack of consistency in what those assessments might look like for English as opposed to what they might look like for math, as opposed to what they're going to look like for woodworking and so forth and so on. So I think it kind of goes back to, really critically thinking about the fact of, are we really going for a one-size-fits-all, like it has to be this 100% across the board, across all 250 courses, or do we have does it make sense, is there some rationale to let course teams, what's the right word here, guide us, inform us, develop and potentially deliver a model that may look different than another course team, but that holds the promise of it having more positive impacts for the students.
Can I just chime? I'm still struggling because there's so much out here. Like, I feel like we need to have it brought in. Like, I'm taking notes and I'm like, okay, there's you've taken more notes than I have. And I just don't know, like, how do we get to a spot that has it more organized? Because I'm like all over the place. So that's just kind of where I've kind of processed the conversation here, so I don't know.
Well, I think our goal is to listen and to create our list of the follow-up information we need to come back with.
And
So
just
I
maybe
know
we
I've got my list, Scott has his, and Jen as well, and we'll compare them.
But maybe have it in categories. Do you know what I'm trying to say, like, to come back just in an organized, like, you know, like maybe helpful, just kind of what I've been listening to, like what were the goals, maybe what were the goals in the change? I'm just throwing it out, I mean, but what were some of the problems and concerns that have arisen? What are some of the positives that have come back? And those kind of things, and maybe have some of this, the same consistency, so we can have some way to kind of get a handle on this, whatever that might be, just so that we can look at this systematically, because I just feel like it's a circle conversation, which is a good conversation to have, but some way, how do we move forward is kind of where I'm looking at it, to see, you know, where are we looking at it there, just to have some good outline for it, is my hope.
And maybe you're thinking, how do we measure success? You know, here we are, this is year 2 of the new, you know, you're doing a
Right.
lot of getting feedback, whether, you know, formally, informally, you're assessing, you made some tweaks. Is there some sort of you're looking for maybe a higher level? Here were the goals, here's where we're
I was just trying
at.
to organize the information.
Okay.
I was like, I wasn't even going that far. I was just trying to like say, how do we organize it to present it? Because I just feel like there's been so much here, and like, how do I even get my mind around it because I think there are a lot of positives, like we've pointed out, but there's also a lot of concerns, and there's also a lot of unknowns. So like, because I think it would be really helpful, like when we came forward to meetings, that if maybe we had the same format in discussing it.
So why don't we take a stab at organizing it this week, and I'll let the board know later this week how we see it being organized going forward.
That would be great. Just thanks.
Any other thoughts? All right. Consent agenda. We have now reached the consent agenda. Can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Can we have a roll call, Marilyn?
Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Abear?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes?
Member Kelly?
Yes. Now we're at the non-agenda related public comments. At this time, we will begin the non-agenda related portion of our public comments. Marilyn, do we have any non-agenda related comments?
We do.
If there are speakers, okay. There are 2 opportunities for audience members to address the Board of Education. We appreciate your participation, but please understand we do not engage in dialogue. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Individuals addressing the board are expected to conduct themselves with respect and civility pursuant to Board Policy 830. Individuals shall not use vulgar or obscene language or impede, delay, disrupt, or interfere with the board meeting. In the event this occurs, you'll receive 1 warning regarding your conduct. If the behavior occurs again, you will be notified that you are in violation of trespassing and will be asked to leave our property. Failure to comply immediately and cooperatively with the directive to leave will result in the involvement of law enforcement officials. Marilyn, can you please call our first speaker?
Susan Hughes.
Susan?
Good evening. I'm going to speak to you quickly, as I have 20-plus years of information to fit into 3 minutes. I hope you will have some leniency if I should go a bit over. I'm standing before you as a classified non-contractual representative and as the administrative assistant in the Global Studies Division. And I am not here to complain to you about our compensation, but rather I'm here to share with you undisputable facts. During my research, documents I reviewed identified that the last time a salary review for the classified non-contractual group was performed during the 1999-2000 school year. 21 years have passed without a second professional review of our wages. Please ask yourself if this would be acceptable in your own career. Using this information per the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, $1 in 1999 is equivalent in purchasing power of $1.73 today, producing a cumulative price increase of 73%. However, during the same period of time, 21 years, the compensation wage range for administrative assistants level 4 and 5 shows an increase of only 43.7% on the low wage range and an even lower rate of 33.6%, which is less than the inflation rate on the high wage range. Going further into my analysis, due to a mandated minimum wage increases, we are now experiencing salary compression within the classified non-contractual group. For example, the difference between the 2021 administrative assistant level 4 and 5 wage range and the 21-22 administrative assistant level 4 and 5 wage range shows a 29% increase in the low range salary, while the high range salary remained unchanged, leading to classic salary compression. Salary compression is commonly seen when new employees are offered starting salaries similar to long-standing employees. This can lead to unfair compensation decisions that demotivate and disengage team members, and unfortunately, this is where we are now. To further exacerbate our situation, the cost of the health insurance premium paid by the employee has risen over 300% since 2002. In addition, in 2002, the employee paid 15% of the health care premium. Currently, we are now paying 22%, and this is a 40% increase. Every time we get a cost of living increase, it is offset by an increase in our health insurance premium. Simply put, we are not getting ahead. We are falling further and further behind. LT has kept our group stagnant while boasting about how well our teachers are paid or conducting administrator salary reviews within the last 3 years and making the necessary adjustments. After 21 years of being ignored, undervalued, unappreciated, and neglected, and truly feeling like we do not belong, we realized we need a backbone and not a wishbone anymore. That is what tonight is about for us. We are finally demanding to be treated fairly so we can say, yes, we belong too. We are proud of our work ethic and dedication to Lyons Township High School, its Board of Education, administrators, teachers, staff, and parents. If we didn't love our job and the people we work with, we wouldn't be fighting so hard to stay. I just wanted to be able, I'm not going to keep talking, but I just wanted to let you know that I just put a packet together that, since I couldn't tell you all of the information in 3 minutes, so we put a packet together for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Melinda Edwards. Angela Parton.
Good evening. I attempted to make the school board meeting last month, but I wasn't able to, so I'm picking up on the school board meeting from February, and I would like to give my feedback. So February was the first time that I attended a school board meeting. I do have a son that attends Lyons Township High School and also a 6th grader. In attending the school board meeting, first of all, I would like to say that I have had a lot of good interaction with many of the faculty and teachers throughout the years, but I've also had some challenging occurrences as well. What I would like to touch on is I sat back and I initially wanted to talk about wearing face masks and the vaccines. However, I sat back during a school board meeting. I wanted to listen and get feedback from all the other people that were speaking. And I hear a lot of this equity and inclusion, but what I heard that night was inequity and exclusion. And what I mean by that is listening to the parents, first starting off with a mask. I'm happy that mandate has been lifted. I do perform respiratory testing and am well-versed in PPE selection. So I can give you the sense that it does provide false sense of hope. What I did listen to some parents speaking about unfairness. I heard a young lady up here speak that she wanted to have a Turning Point USA group on the school grounds and was denied. I heard another young lady said that she was white and she felt she was discriminated against because BLM gets to march through the school, but nobody else gets to. I heard another parent say they would like to see more LGBTQ posters posted throughout the facility. Now, I do believe in a right for everybody, but what about the people who do not fall into these categories? Where's the fairness for them? There's not heterosexual posters throughout the school. There's not family units posted throughout the school. There's not freedom of religion for all parties throughout the school system. I believe that these things should be left to the home and not in the school system. Let's focus on the curriculum. My 6th grader, I did pull her out of public school because I saw her failing, and I saw her coming home speaking about everything else but the curriculum. She's doing great now. And speaking of the curriculum, she's back to Saxon, Math, Shirley, English. It's a fair grading system. She gets feedback. It's much more helpful than what I see my high schooler going through. I feel the Common Core curriculum is challenging for them. It's too much to keep up with. It's confusing for the parents. The grading system online, I hear the talk of the formatives, summatives, etc. The formatives, these students feel that it doesn't count. And so they don't want to do the work because if they feel it doesn't count, what's the incentive for them to do it? And I know I'm over my 3 minutes.
I know, we got to stop you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Again, all fairness, I think a lot of this is causing division. It's causing depression in our children, and it needs to stop. Let's focus back on education, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky Lawrenson.
Hello, everybody. I'll be really brief. I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Waterman talked about. I'm part of the community diversity group here in LaGrange, and I don't think the intent is to not focus on people like me have always had our voices heard, but people that I know who aren't like me, who might be of color, might be disabled, might be LGBTQ, often don't hear their voices heard. And so I really applaud the efforts of the school board to include those people that haven't been included before. And along those lines, I just wanted to mention a couple things that Dr. Waterman mentioned that we're co-sponsoring, and appreciate the support of the board for trying to allow those voices to be heard. There's going to be the presentation with the League of Women Voters and Community Diversity Group this coming Thursday from 7 to 8:30, which will be Zoom. And you'll get to hear all the things that are happening as well as the challenges along the lines of diversity. And then also the conference, I would recommend that this would be something you could come to hear stories of people who maybe haven't had their voices heard, to learn more about these different topics. And that, as Dr. Waterman said, is on Saturday, the 30th of April, and I think all the information is on your website. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments for this section.
That concludes the open session portion of tonight's meeting. The board will be adjourning into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda. We will not be taking action when we return to open session. Is there a motion to adjourn into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda?
Second.
Marilyn, can you take the roll? Yes.
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 Thank you, Marilyn.